Morning, guys. I don't know if there's something wrong. Okay. So, power, they say, politics, they say, is power. And power cannot exist without a constitution that govern and provide the real power for is for a government to be able to carry out executive orders. Power, they say, is politics, and politics, they say, is power. But power, however you define it, cannot function effectively without a constitution. For any sitting government, for any government to carry out executive order or execute any executive constitutional power, it must derive its power from the constitution. Power, they say, politics, they say, is power, and power is derived from a constitution. For every government to function and carry out its executive activities, it must derive its powers from the constitution. And every government has a constitution. The constitution guides and provides the executive power for the government to be able to carry out its orders. Now, on this episode of how the former president of now the former president of Nigeria, President Goodluck Jonathan, has revealed Power, they say, is derived from a group of people who've come together to form a community. Politics is a dirty game. Everybody knows that. But politics is a corridor of power. Politics or politicians are the most powerful people in the planet. Politicians are the most powerful people on planet. Why? Because politics is the road towards leadership. Leadership is government. Government is power. Now, all of these put together cannot function effectively without a political governing constitution. A constitution is a doctrine of necessity that governs and guides every government to be able to carry out its executive orders. Without a constitution, no government can function effectively and carry out its executive activities if not provided for by a constitution. Now, the former president of Nigeria, President Goodluck Jonathan, has given a revelation of what transpired as at the time he was vice president to Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, who passed away in 2010. During the time when President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua was president, he took ill after being in power for a couple of years. He was supposed to be in power for at least 8 years according to the constitution. 8 years in tenure. Now, remember that President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua was a northern Muslim president. And as a president, he was supposed to be in power for at least 8 years per tenure. Now, suddenly he took ill. I think he took ill towards the end of his 8-year tenure. But then there was a year gap before the tenure comes to an end when he took ill. And he was flown to Saudi Arabia for treatment. Within this time period, according to Goodluck Jonathan, who reveals that within the constitution provided for that when a sitting president for any reason is to be absent from office, he is to write a directive letter instructing the National Assembly or the National Executive Council to install the vice president as the acting president until his return from whatever leave of absence, until he returns from whatever leave of absence he has taken. Until he returns from whatever leave of absence he has taken. Now, during this time when President Umar Musa Yar'Adua was in Saudi Arabia for treatment, his condition worsened, his health deteriorated. And within this time, the people around the president did not want to reveal this to the public, especially to the people of Nigeria. But then the vice president was aware of what was happening. He was also aware that the constitution provided for him to be installed as the acting president at the time. But that didn't happen. Why? Because a single individual known as an aide to the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, whom have written a letter directing the National Assembly to transfer his executive power to the vice president to be acting president, held down to the letter, refused to present the letter to the National Assembly, and therefore obstructing the Constitution of Nigeria from taking its real action. Now, what was this? This was a single man preventing an entire country's constitution, entire 3 tiers of government, unable to carry out its executive orders that is supposed to be passed down from the president down to the National Assembly, to the states, and to the local government. A single individual refused. Now, the fragility within this context is that a constitution is written to be able to empower the leadership, the leaders, the president, the governors, and every executive elected official to carry out executive power and functions, without which no president, no Senate president, no Speaker of the House of Representatives, no Speaker of the House of Representatives, or the governor, or even a state local government chairman, or the judiciary cannot carry out its executive function without the constitution. Now, here is a man who took advantage of the fact that he was handed over a letter that could have changed the course of history in Nigeria. These are the fragility of an unspoken power vested interest politicians within the corridor of Nigerian politics. Now, in this revelation, Goodluck Jonathan also stated that within the time frame that the president was in Saudi Arabia receiving treatment, he was in the State House, there were threats and there were discussion of a coup, whether it's a civilian coup, a democratic coup, or a military coup. A coup could have taken place, and that coup could have been anything. He also spoke about how his life was in danger as at the time, because the Northerners didn't want to lose the power to a Southerner because it wasn't zoned to the South yet. Remember, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua took power from a Southern president in the name of President Olusegun Obasanjo, who passed power to the Northern Muslim president, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua. According to zoning of our presidency in Nigeria, after Umaru Musa Yar'Adua tenure was over, he was to transfer power or hand over to a Southern president. Now, whether or not President Goodluck Jonathan was to be a president, this wasn't his time. And by the calculation of the North, this was not going to be in favor of the North. So they wanted to hold on to power. So they refused to let go or to reveal to the public that President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua was incapacitated and could not carry out his executive functions, through which the Constitution already have given orders that if in any situation at all that the president cannot carry out his function, power should be transferred to the vice president in a written note. Remember, if this was to be in America, if the president is to take a leave of absence for at least 5 minutes for a surgical operation where he's going to be unconscious, he is to transfer his power as an executive and commander-in-chief to the vice president, making the vice president commander-in-chief. But this did not happen during the time when President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua was taking leave of absence and was in Saudi Arabia taking treatment. Behind the scene, there were political tussle going on. There was a war of zoning happening silently. Because now, here is a president, a northern president, who is incapable of carrying out his executive powers or his executive orders. Here is a southern vice president who was not given the rights, the power, or transfer into as the president of Nigeria, depriving the nation of leadership. Now, what does it tell you? It tells you that the Constitution can be a doctrine of necessity, it can be a doctrine of power, but at the same time, a Constitution can be taken advantage of. And this is what happened in Nigeria, because in Nigeria, anything can happen. Now, in this revelation, we also hear the vice president who revealed, the former president revealed that while he was contesting for the presidency as a Southerner, the Northerners were also still interested, with the claims that they didn't finish their tenure and therefore they needed another tenure. Why should a Northerner be contesting an election against a Southerner when they know that the zone was already zoned to the south. Although zoning of presidency in Nigeria is not an official or a legal binded or provision by this Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, but then this agreement has been set upon by the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria. And according to the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria, when the zoning has moved to a certain zone, that zone is to assume power as the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That zone is to provide whoever their candidate is to be. Now, remember that in Nigeria, even if the zone for the presidency has been moved to your zone, the other zones still provide its candidate. What if at this time that zone that have been in power in the previous administration wins election again? Does that interrupt the agreement? Does that interfere with the Constitution? Now, here is a malign underlining conflict within which you as a Nigerian has to take some extra lens to be able to see through what the Constitution can and cannot do. Because the Constitution can be manipulated, can be trampled upon, can be misquoted, can be misguided. We have seen this happen time without number in Nigeria. Okay.